Van Dusen, Executive Vice President of the Center. Lee Hamilton, the President and Director of the Center, regrets that he could not be here this morning because he has an all-day meeting of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board as well as the CIA's Advisory Committee. The Woodrow Wilson Center is delighted to welcome Minister Mohammad Safadi to this Directors Forum at the Center, which is co-hosted by the Safadi Foundation USA. The Woodrow Wilson Center and its Middle East program have benefited enormously from collaboration with and the support of the Safadi Foundation USA. The Wilson Center also has benefited from the wise counsel of Lara Alame and the Executive Director of the Safadi Foundation USA and General Tanous Muawad, both here today accompanying the minister. I would also like to recognize the presence of Ambassador Shadid of Lebanon, and I believe also Ambassador Malouf, and I believe the Ambassador of East Timor, Ambassador Pinto. We welcome all three to the center. The Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars is the national living memorial honoring President Woodrow Wilson and providing an essential link between the worlds of ideas and public policy. The Center addresses current and future challenges confronting the nation and the world. The Center promotes policy-relevant research and dialogue to increase understanding and be instrumental in enhancing the capabilities and knowledge of leaders, citizens, and institutions worldwide. Created by an act of Congress 42 years ago, the Center is a nonpartisan and non-advocacy institution supported by both public and private funds. In seeking to bring a wide spectrum of people together to discuss critical issues of the day, we have a confident hope that from their dialogue on public policy issues, participants can learn from each other. The work of all will be enriched, and better understanding and better policy can emerge. Through close to 800 meetings a year in the presence of over 150 scholars during the course of a year, the Center's work and scholarship commemorates the concerns and ideals of Woodrow Wilson. This meeting today is very much in the Wilsonian tradition, bringing together practitioners and scholars for an informed exchange on what is clearly an extraordinarily important issue for Lebanon, namely domestic reform to expand economic opportunity and break down the clientelist structure of the Lebanese state. Minister Safadi has had an impressive career as a successful businessman, philanthropist, and politician. He is a graduate of the American University of Beirut and started his career in business. Mr. Safadi has served in Lebanon's National Assembly for the last decade and now serves as Minister of Economy and Trade. Minister Safadi himself is very much in the Wilsonian tradition. He combines the best of the public and private sectors, and he is uniquely qualified to address his subject, the possible roads for domestic reform in Lebanon. I know we will have a productive session. Minister Safadi, welcome again to the Woodrow Wilson Center. The floor is yours. The minister has graciously agreed to answer some questions after his opening remarks. Thank you for being here this morning.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you here today. I would like first to thank the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars for hosting our delegation and for their support of the Safadi Foundation USA and an American nonprofit organization that is dedicated to advancing Lebanon's social and economic development. Allow me also to pay recognition to the Honorable Lee Hamilton, an eminent public servant with a long and distinguished record, including his tenacious upholding of the mission of this center, which is to bring the world of ideas to the practical world of politics. A special recognition is also due to Mike Van Dusen, Hale Asfandayari, and Muna Youssef for their commitment to maintaining the academic integrity and tradition of excellence of this institution. My talk today is about reform, essentially political reform, in Lebanon. Specifically, it is about a dilemma that arises out of the nature of our political system. The dilemma, in fact, applies beyond Lebanon to the whole of the Middle East, and even to countries in the developing world with underdeveloped political institutions. The dilemma is the following. Lebanon is a liberal democracy that, despite its limitations and shortcomings, is nonetheless an effective and living democracy with regular, open elections and where basic human freedoms are enjoyed and practiced. Political power, however, is shared according to religious affiliation. The president is a Maronite Christian, the Speaker of the House a Shiite Muslim, and the Prime Minister a Sunnite Muslim. And reform, as history confirms, always starts with a political decision that is accompanied by a sustained reform process. So how can a traditional political class whose power and privileges derive from religious affiliation, how can such a political class undertake fundamental political reforms that would most likely undermine its privileges? That is the dilemma. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? Matthew 5:13. This question dilemma is an important one because of its relevance to many other countries, and because it arises despite the fact that Lebanon has benefited from advantages and characteristics that in many respects were economically and politically unique. Nonetheless, Lebanon has reached a situation where genuine reform appears practically impossible to implement. Let me explain. Politically, and since independence, Lebanon has practiced the basics of democracy with the effective exercise of personal freedoms and rights, and the society remains the most open and tolerant in the region. But the distribution of power, according to religious affiliation, with all the widespread political, economic, and social ramifications that such a system entails, is in conflict with the fundamentals of democracy that are based on the principle of equal rights and responsibilities of all citizens. That conflict has been a major source of status or inertia with respect to political reform in Lebanon. Throughout our modern history, most governments were compromise governments, and policy has been mostly conducted by way of compromise building. That is not necessarily a bad thing, especially in our part of the world. But government by compromise is not very conducive to reform, which needs singular visions and a sustained drive. Moreover, compromise governments cannot respond quickly and effectively to political and unusual challenges that we experienced prior to the onset of the Civil War in 1975. This is all the more problematic if you live in a dangerous neighborhood, as we do. Our economy, though performing relatively well, is in need of essential reforms. We continue to produce the highest per capita GDP among all the non-oil economies in the region, amounting in 2009 to more than $8,000 or around $14,000 in terms of purchasing power parity. With few natural resources, this performance owes much to Lebanon's open and democratic system. But our socio-economic performance is not altogether bright. The distribution of our income and wealth is unacceptably unequal. Economic growth and the generation of employment opportunities are biased in favor of a few activities, tourism and real estate, that are centered in Beirut and the surroundings to the detriment of the majority of the population and the country at large. This performance is not compatible with social and political stability. We need reforms that make the economy more productive, of decent incomes and jobs across the country. Success in economic reforms would make political reform much easier than otherwise. But these needed economic reforms would have to be politically initiated and, as such, are constrained by the same considerations that are encountered in the political domain. So where do we go from here? I would like to propose the following way out of our dilemma. If Lebanon's polity cannot or would not reform itself, then perhaps we can implement projects that would, of themselves, create a dynamic that makes political reform inevitable, or at least easier to undertake. Such projects would have to be few and feasible. Above all, they would have to be far-reaching in their economic and social impact so that a new momentum is generated that would almost force political reform. I have in mind two specific projects, out of which I have already proposed one to the Council of Ministers and received initial approval. The projects in question are respectively in the domains of human and physical infrastructure. The first one consists of reforming the education system in public schools with the objective of significantly improving the standards and quality of education. Studies have shown that such a project is not costly, a few $100 million at most, but requires dedication and perseverance over a number of years. The benefits of such implementation of such a project affect all economic activities and sectors by making labor and the economy more productive and by taking the economy's growth potential to a higher level. More important, however, is the fact that the implementation of such a project would strengthen the link between citizens and the state by providing all future generations with the opportunity of obtaining a good education at little cost. Such a development would send a signal to all that henceforth citizens can benefit from a much more equal opportunity field for jobs and incomes, which would reduce the need to have recourse to religious or religious community schools. That is also political reform. The second project consists of the construction of a modern high-speed railway system along the coastline of Lebanon, to be linked through a few highways to major cities in the mountains, thus creating a modern national transportation network that would facilitate and speed the transportation of merchandise and people throughout the country. It is difficult to underestimate the economic and social benefits of such a project, which would induce people to live outside the already choking Greater Beirut, stimulate a wave of new investments, and the creation of new businesses and jobs. In this regard, I would like to draw attention to the relevance of the so-called PPP, public-private partnership, in making such a project a reality. We have an enterprising private sector in Lebanon that could be attracted to participate in various aspects of the project in question, including financing, when it sees the project promoting its long-term interests. That would be a genuine PPP project that can serve as a model for other projects and other countries in the region. These two social economic projects are foremost political projects in that they tend to strengthen the bond between Lebanese citizens and the state as a truly public and non-religious entity that serves the public interest. By stimulating national development and reinforcing the condition of citizenship through the implementation of a couple of national socio-economic projects, genuine political reforms may become less forbidding, and Lebanon could gradually but effectively emerge as a strong and modern democracy. Is reform possible in Lebanon? Yes, it is. But the task is arduous and requires imaginative politics and economics. If anything, Lebanon's democracy has survived the test of domestic and foreign wars, sometimes simultaneously. I believe it can also meet the more difficult challenge of political reforms. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Safadi. I think the floor is open. I ask that we have a microphone on either side, and we'll get a microphone to you, and no speeches, comments, and questions. And identify yourself. Yes, in the third row with a pink tie.
Thank you. You noticed that. Thank you very much, Mr. Van Dusen. Minister, I agree with everything you said, and I hope it comes true. But how possible is reform in Lebanon at any level in the presence of Hezbollah weapons and the weapons of Palestinians, particularly outside the Palestinian refugee camps? Thanks.
These are two different issues. If we're talking about the entire system, yes, the system is a bad system from the aspect of religion plays a very important role, and it affects the administration in Lebanon, as you know. But if we want to look at Hezbollah issue at large, Hezbollah basically have got the excuse to say that in the absence of a strong army, in the absence of a strong state, in the absence of the state at large, it is our job to defend Lebanon, and it's our job to actually, get Shaba farms and the other areas back to Lebanon. It's an argument that one could listen to and say, yeah, fine, it's an argument that is acceptable in the absence of the army and in the absence of the state. But what should we do about it? Today, they are the most powerful armed faction in Lebanon. And this is the truth. And we cannot combat that by asking other Lebanese to start militias and get themselves also all the weapons they need and be ready to fight with Hezbollah. We destroy the country. Is our objective to destroy the country? No, definitely not. So the only way out, really, the only way out is to get the army back on its feet and get the army, really the army that all Lebanese would feel that it is the army's job to protect their interest and their future and the sovereignty of the country. And then with the presence of such an army, I'm sure the role of Hezbollah will diminish very quickly. Today, we have the national dialogue. It started again, and it is to agree on a defensive strategy for Lebanon. I mean, immediately one would say, okay, fine, they're going to be talking for next year, 2, 3, who knows, but, they're not going to come out with a solution. It's a statement I might tend to agree with initially. But sitting around the table and talking and making sure that your army is growing and getting to be really the strongest armed legal body in the country, then with that, then I think Hezbollah role will diminish, and it will diminish very quickly. Thank you.
Yes, lady over here.
Hello, welcome to DC, Minister Safadi. My name is Jumana Makarim. I'm a recent PhD graduate in U.S. politics or political science. I think the two projects you mentioned are fascinating, and definitely they will be very good long-term solutions to problems we have in Lebanon. My question is, what kind of educational reform are you talking about? Will you be increasing funding to make education more available to different, socioeconomic groups? And is it at the university level or the kind of younger children level? Thank you.
Just to give you an idea, the productivity of Lebanese workforce in 1974, it was 25% more than in 2009. And that says a lot. That says a lot because our education system prior to 1975 was a much higher standard than what we have today. And the whole education system was really something to be proud of. Unfortunately, the Civil War threw us backward. And we sustained 17 years of continuous damage, to our education system. And we need to rebuild it again. If we rebuild it again to what it was in 1975, then we would have done a very good job. Because we really need people who graduate from schools, And these people are the workforce. These people who graduate from these schools should have the proper knowledge and the proper education, the high school education, to carry them through in all their technical activities in the future. That's what we need to restore back. And that needs really to look at our curriculum again, look at our schools, look at everything has got to be revamped again. And that's where we should start. It's going to take long years, but at least we have to start and carry on. Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman there, and then...
Hey, how's it going, sir? My name is Alex Dunoyer. I'm with Georgetown University. And I thoroughly agree with your comments and your recommendations on how to go forward. But the question I would ask is, if you do improve the education system and you don't create coincidentally some sort of industry or opportunities for these well-educated people, what do you think of the human capital in your country? Are people going to flock outside, or how are you going to fulfill these needs of the folks that are educated?
One of the major economic problems that we've been faced with, is the cost of energy. And that drove a lot of industries out of business. It stopped the growth of a lot of certain industries. Our electricity problems, I think most of the people know. We generate half of our requirement, and the other half it's generated by people on their own, or some of it, not necessarily all. So we have a power problem, and we have a high cost involved with it. Having said that, today we are more fortunate that the gas line from Egypt has reached us in North Lebanon. So at least we have a low cost of energy, fuel, that is there, and we should really start rebuilding the industries that we wanted to have at a much more competitive energy prices. And that's something we have already started working on, to actually with the intention to create a lot more jobs. Lebanon historically has been an exporting country of people, and it's something I think it will stay for quite some time, because the way we look at the Arab countries around us, we look at as if they're integral part of an area. So if you move out of Lebanon and work in Saudi Arabia, it's quite normal. It's not abnormal at all. Or if you work in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, it's people who actually leave Lebanon and fly west, fly to the USA or fly to Canada or fly to Europe. Most of these people, unfortunately, don't come back, and we would have lost important resources in our economy. So we do have a brain drain to the West, but as far as the Middle East is concerned, no, we look at it as really it's a positive input to our economy. Thank you.
Yes, the lady in the back. Yeah, use the microphone.
Thank you for your insightful remarks. Nadia Abaras Assad with the Renee Mawad Foundation. I totally agree with you that education and availability to everyone in Lebanon is the pillar for any kind of political reform. And as you said, it was available prior to the war, yet we did have sectarianism across the board. How do you introduce a non-sectarian mindset in the new approach to education that will eliminate this sectarian divide in Lebanon?
You want an easy answer? Yes. Change all the politicians. No, really, I mean, sectarianism is part of Lebanon. It is there. It is something we have to live with. But at the end of the day, it's important that we have citizenship at the same time. If we believe in Lebanon, and we are citizens of Lebanon, and these citizens of Lebanon happen to be Muslims or Christians or Jews or whatever it is, okay, then we don't have a problem. Our problem today, that if you ask somebody, where are you from, or who are you, he says, I'm a Maronite from Mount Lebanon, or I'm a Sunnite from Tripoli, or I'm a Shiite from the south. So he starts by talking about his religion first. And then later on, he says, oh yeah, I am Lebanese also, by the way, you know, I am Lebanese. And this is one of the really serious problems that we face. And that's what we should rebuild. And that could be rebuilt through education at the same time. Thank you.
Yeah. David Ottaway, and then next.
I'm Dave Ottaway. I'm a senior scholar here. I was foreign correspondent for the Washington Post in the Middle East back in the 80s. My question is, to what extent has Hezbollah developed its own banking, economic, I know it's politically independent, but to what extent is Lebanon today really kind of a co-federation in which Hezbollah has developed its own institutions, whether it's education or economic, banking, etc.?
Social services.
Social services. To what extent are they independent of the state system now?
Hezbollah developed, a lot of areas that I don't want to use the word control, but they are present in. And they built schools, they built hospitals, they improved the sewage system, they improved the water system, And Iran actually have done a lot of that work too. I mean, so it was some of that work. It came as a donation by Iran to the government of Lebanon, and the work was done in these areas and other areas, and other areas. Some of the areas actually refused any help from Iran for political reasons, of course. But yes, there's a lot of infrastructure work that was done by Hezbollah. But one of the issues that we had, one of the reasons, 7th May problems in Beirut 3 years ago, it was 2007. It was because Hezbollah has put their own communication lines, underground communication lines. And basically, they have telephone lines that they can use commercially if they wish, anytime. They don't use it commercially. But they have the argument that, okay, we have Israel as the enemy, and our communication system should not be exposed, it should not be overground, it should not be through radios. It should be done underground. So that system is that we have put is purely military and has got nothing to do with any commercial use or use. Okay, the government of Lebanon were not happy about that, but it looked at it at the end as part of defending the Hezbollah and defending Lebanon strategy. Having said that, Hezbollah, I don't think they want to build their own state in Lebanon. I don't believe so. Hezbollah today, they either will take over Lebanon completely, or they won't exist in the future. And it's up to us to make sure they don't take over Lebanon. And the Lebanese, I'm sure, will make sure that Hezbollah or anybody else will not take over Lebanon. But it's also important, as I said earlier, we have to really rebuild our capacity. We have to build our army. We have to build our institutions. There is a lot of work we should do. And I cannot blame Hezbollah or anybody else for improving the living conditions in the areas that they are in. And it is the duty of the government, actually, to walk in there and do the work and let all the Lebanese feel, whether they belong to Hezbollah or anybody else, let all the Lebanese feel that they have one government which is in charge and which is responsible for all Lebanese citizens, irrespective of their religion and irrespective of their political stance. Thank you.
Yeah, the gentleman in the green jacket.
Thank you, Minister Safadi, for your very thoughtful remarks, and again, welcome to Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
My name is John Finney. I'm from the Department of Defense, and I wanted to ask you about tourism in Lebanon and its possible connection to this modern transport system that you suggested in your remarks. USA Today last month had a front page article about the tremendous increase in tourism to Beirut and to Lebanon, one of the largest increases in the world. And I was interested in your remarks. Number one, how do you see the increase in tourism contributing to your economic plans? And two, could that increase be harnessed to support and generate the modern transportation system you're talking about? Thank you.
Thank you. Last year, we had a growth of 9%. The year before, it was 8%. You know, we have enjoyed a growth, unfortunately, when the rest of the world have been having negative growth even. So we've been lucky from that aspect. But we do have infrastructure problems. And last year, we have seen that big influx of tourists. A lot of them are actually Lebanese abroad who came to Lebanon, and they have used the infrastructure, and the infrastructure could hardly cope with their presence. If we do not have serious investment in our infrastructure, I'm sorry to say that our growth would dwindle down very quickly, and we will not be able, and tourists, who come there won't come back again, if they do not get the basic services. Tourists they can tolerate, a lot of things, but basic things they cannot tolerate, electricity, water, transportation. So any project that actually relieves the problem of the congestion of transportation is a good project. It helps the country. It helps everybody. And what was important about the railway itself, Lebanon is a small country, and consecutive governments have been trying to introduce growth in the remote areas, and they failed. And they failed purely because transportation is a very bad thing out of the capital. So whoever wants to invest in Lebanon, any international investor, focused on Beirut and the area around it because that was the most accessible. Any areas further than that, created a transportation problem. So a train, actually, a railway system, links Lebanon into one economic unit. And then it opens the road for investments all over the area, because you can get to your factory in 1 hour max wherever you are. You can transport your goods in 1 hour max from wherever they are produced, and it's an easy, sure way of transportation. And, so that's where the importance of the railway back in Lebanon. We had the railway before 75. I mean, the most unfortunate thing is that everything we talk about now that we should do, we've had before, and that's a shame. But we really need to have it back. Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman, red tie. Yep. Next to the green shirt.
Thank you very much. Dick Schubert from the International Youth Foundation. Mr. Minister, thank you for your remarks. It seems to me that you've made a very powerful case. What are the religious/political objections, or is it simply a matter of finances to do what you are asking?
There is no religious or political or any objection that one might find in his way. What it needs really willpower, dedication, planning, and money. It needs all these, but there's nothing, there are no major obstacles to actually do what we have to do. But having said that, during the war, the civil war, a lot of people use the railway property, for other purposes. Some have built houses even there. So what we need is to clear that track completely again. And that will take some time, because our judicial system is not as fast as we would like it to be. Other than that, we don't see any problems. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that for a second, you referred earlier, I think, Mr. Minister, to the railway project as a PPP, a public-private partnership. Do you think the private sector is at this point in time, interested in putting big money behind that?
I mean, any big money in Lebanon, whoever wants to put it is always afraid of what could happen in Lebanon. We are in an area of a lot of unknowns. And that area of unknowns, we could have a war overnight. Thank God we do not see us having a civil war again, and that's very important. It doesn't mean that things cannot happen, other things that cannot happen. So for any such investor, it is a very important issue. And here is where international agencies, like the agency that the World Bank has, which is MIGA, such international agencies actually give insurance on the capital of investing in Lebanon. They give insurance on non-payment of government or government agencies. They give insurance on civil commotions. They give insurance, any cessation of production for over a month, for reasons beyond the control of the investors. So basically, there are ways and means where investors, international investors, could invest in Lebanon and rest assured that anything that is not supposed to happen there, if it does happen, then at least his investment is 100% insured and secured. And this is important, And this service, I'd like to invite, companies in the U.S. to actually look at this service, because then you can invest in Lebanon and invest with Lebanese or without Lebanese. It's your choice. But then your investment is actually guaranteed by the World Bank. Thank you.
Yeah. The lady in the brown here, and then the lady in the black.
The ladies get the bland description and the men get the Thai description.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. Minister Safadi, good morning. My name is Maya Bouali. I work with Marathon Oil here in D.C. But I am a Lebanese, and my question is going to be more on the end of the Lebanese and not the energy sector. I am a product of what you spoke about the brain drain from Lebanon. I am also the product of a high school system in Lebanon, but a product of the undergraduate system here in the U.S. I just finished my graduate. I'm about to go into my graduate degree, and I'm thinking about going back to Lebanon and not staying in this country because this is not my country, and I would like to go back home like everyone else who is abroad. I'm finding it very difficult, I can tell you that on a personal level, locating job opportunities in Lebanon from here. There's no database, there's no online information, no infrastructure, nothing that you can contact someone, send your resume to, work with in Lebanon so you could get these opportunities that you are looking for. So my question to you is, which are the sectors in the field, as Minister of Economy and Trade, do you feel in Lebanon are really facing a shortage in human capital? There are Lebanese abroad, very bright Lebanese abroad, who have great degrees in all kinds of fields and sectors. They just don't know what opportunities are available in Lebanon for them.
Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, we are a country that is famous for our banking system, you know, and we have been fortunate that our banks have grown, and our deposits are grown, and they are 4 times the size of our GDP, which is good and frightening at the same time. But having said that, really, our banking system in Lebanon lacks a lot of trained, experienced bankers, trained, experienced Lebanese bankers in the world. There are so many good Lebanese bankers internationally, and they have reached really top jobs in a lot of international banks. But our banking system, although it's a very good system, it's a very clean system, it's a very well-maintained system, it's a very well-controlled system from one aspect. I mean, that's why we did not have the problems of the economic problems recently. But, yes, we need people in our banking system. But the pay structure in Lebanon, it is different to the international pay structure. We are a much smaller country. Our banks are a lot smaller. What we look at as a big bank in Lebanon, it's a very small bank internationally. You know, so people who have enjoyed working in international big banks find it very difficult to go back to Lebanon and work in what they feel as small banks. You know, and we have. So this is an industry that has been flourishing for a long time. And everybody thinks that it is superb in its let's say, structuring capabilities or this or that. But we really lack a lot of people, a lot of Lebanese to work into it. That's one example. Another example. I'll talk a bit about energy, maybe. We have so many problems in energy, and we recognize really that privatization is the proper way forward and something that we committed to. And I'd like to just say one thing about privatization for those who do not know. Prior to the Civil War, most of our utilities were actually in the private sector. They were not owned by the government. But a lot of these utilities and services have been thrown in the lap of the government during the Civil War. So basically now, if we're talking about privatization, we're saying we should give back to the private sector what they had before the war. The government is not the right person to produce electricity. The government is not the right person to do waterworks. The government is not, but the government should be the right person to put the right procedures, the right controls, the right to protect the citizens. Yes, this is our job, but it's not our job to produce electricity. And that's where the private sector should play a very important role. So privatizing electricity, we can talk about privatizing management to start with, at least to introduce privatization slowly. If we have political constraints on some of the privatization issues, but we can always privatize management as something to start with. Our port was owned privately, and then the government took it over. It was given back to the government, and the government kept it running as a private enterprise owned by the government. The port is making very good profits. Everything that the government holds and is being managed as a semi-private, it is making money. And everything that the government controls directly is losing money. So this is something we have. So having said that, there are job opportunities in all the fields in privatization, whether in airports, whether in ports, whether in communication, whether in telecommunication. Any field really we lack people in. And just something easy. I actually had mentioned earlier. If you want an accountant in Lebanon, a good accountant, basic good accountant, it's so difficult to find. And when you find one, he asks 3 to 4 folds what should be his pay scheme. So yes, we invite you. And really, as you said, we should put forward a scheme where we can support those abroad with a lot of information about what is available in the country and what are the plans forward. Thank you.
The Minister was mentioning earlier in a private conversation he put out, I believe, an announcement for a job for somebody in civil engineering in northern Lebanon, in Tripoli. And after several weeks, one person applied, and he was my age and not ready to take on a full-time job again. The lady over, yeah.
Hi, I'm Nawaz, Department of Defense. Sir, could you please talk to us about, one, what are the measures that your government is taking to address public deficit in the country? B, corruption within the political/ruling class in Lebanon. Thank you.
Easy questions. I'd like to talk about deficit a bit. I mean, if we're talking about ratios, we're doing very well. The ratio of our deficit, or our debt, to our GDP, is getting less and less. We are, I think, 138. 138, today. We started with 165 or 170. And it was 180, yeah, and we're now 138. So ratios-wise, we're doing very well. But is our deficit growing? Yes, it is growing. And are there proper measures that are taken now effectively to stop that growth? My answer is no. And the no is for a lot of reasons. And again, it is today the governments in Lebanon are compromised governments. And in compromised governments, you have to compromise. And each party or each party involved in that government looks that it is his duty to serve the community and serve the country and spend money accordingly to do projects that politically they'll go in favor of the government and the party that the minister belongs to. So there are a lot of pressures that are being put on the Ministry of Finance to come out with certain sums of money that really the ministry wouldn't like to, but there are a lot of political pressures that are causing that extra, I wouldn't say extra expenditure. I mean, our budget is made basically of salaries to the employees in the government, plus a bit more for investment, and a major portion, goes to pay the interest on our debt. The interest on our debt constitutes over 35% of our budget. 35% of our budget goes on payment of interest. So yes, we do have lots of constraints. We have lots of problems, but our economy is growing, and I hope that with some projects and economic plans that we're trying to put together, that actually it was one thing that I want to add here. It is something that will be very seriously addressed soon by the Lebanese government. I just wanted to add this bit. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Minister, we've been here for an hour, and there's been no reference to the elephant that is in the room or may be in the room. And I was just curious if you could end and say a word about Syria and the Lebanese-Syrian relationship, and to what degree Syria is a constraint on the politics and the economics of what you're trying to see have done in the country. And we will conclude with that, and I apologize for holding you for a couple of minutes just to get something on that issue on the record.
Thank you. I mean, we have had, Syria has always, for long years, since the independence of Lebanon, Syria has always influenced or tried to influence Lebanese politics and Lebanon at large. It's the larger country, it's the dominant country, it is all around us. We have Israel in the south, and then Syria all around our borders, and then it's the sea. So for any crossing we want to do to the Arab countries, any transit business, any trade we want to do to send goods and across, we have to go through Syria. So Syria has been the valve that we have to cross. So if the Syrians are happy with us, the flow is very good. If the Syrians are unhappy with us, then they close that valve and we're stuck. And that has really affected our business with a lot of the Arab countries. Because if anybody wants to order goods from Lebanon, he wants to make sure that they are delivered. And we always would like to have them delivered, but experience showed that the Syrians could actually put pegs in the wheel any time. And so over the years, this has damaged our transit business tremendously. And our transit business was a very, very important part of our economy at one time. Very important. So it has damaged our transit business. It has damaged our production because we could not sell our goods. And Syria all through has used the borders as a way to filter their cheaper goods, their cheaper agricultural products, and they've always enjoyed the Lebanese market by sending, they have 1 million and odd laborers in Lebanon, and these 1 million laborers do not pay any taxes at all in Lebanon. They earn, and they send the money to Syria. So there are a lot of benefits that Syria has out of Lebanon, and yet at the same time, Syria is the key, to our transit business and a lot of our trade. And really, at the end, it is in our interest and the Syrian interest to have proper sovereign relationships with one another. We need to develop our trade. We need to develop our transit business again. We need all this. But we need that relationship with Syria to be a proper relationship between two sovereign countries. I mean, today we have a Syrian ambassador. It's a good way forward. Would like to see that this formalizing the relationship between Syria and Lebanon increases, and a lot of other things. Would like to see our borders defined properly. Would like to see that, Shab'a Farms ownership is again clear between the Lebanese and the Syrians, because this is creating a confusion. For example, of course, we as the Lebanese government, we confirm that Shab'a Farms are ours, or half of it at least is ours, some part. Syria does not confirm anything. They don't say that it is Lebanese, and they don't say it's non-Lebanese. So Israel says, I don't know, I'm occupying whose land? So you say it is Lebanese? No, it's not Lebanese, it's Syrian. I'm occupying Syrian land. Okay, so you Lebanese don't have any land to claim, and Hezbollah, what are you fighting for? There is no land left, for you to regain, So all that confusion between us and Syria have got to be cleared, and it's very important to us to move forward. Having said that, and here is where the better working relationship we have with Syria, the more we can solve these problems. And really, economically, Syria is very important to us. Syria is a big market. They have, relative to us, over 22, 24 million, population. We have 4 only. So if we add 24 million to our 4, we have a consuming market of 28 million, which is very good for us. And the Lebanese have always had the expertise in capital and in manufacturing and in marketing, and especially marketing, where the Syrians lag behind tremendously. So yes, we are for good relations with Syria, good working relations with Syria, within the constraints of that we are 2 independent sovereign countries, and we don't interfere and meddle into each other businesses.
Thank you for that. Do you have a concluding comment?
No, I totally agree with his example. Especially about the embassy. 2 different statements.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Thank you.